Hey, Prasanna.
Hey Shekhar, how are you doing?
Good, man. Hey, I'm actually glad that we are going to be talking about a subject or a topic that is pretty relevant now, with all these emerging trends and new technologies, AI, the enterprise architecture itself is changing, and the future of services, in SaaS is something, that I think everybody is very inquisitive about, right? How things are going to change. So I'm glad I'm going to get some fresh perspectives from you, and I'm also happy to share some perspectives on that. But just to get
Absolutely.
started, Prasanna, I think we should first look at how did this services evolve? Because my understanding is that over time this SaaS adoption itself has improved and become very strong because of how the services have evolved in SaaS, right? So, do you want, would love to hear your perspective on the evolution of these services in SaaS.
Yep. So, before we go to that, I think we'll just take a couple of minutes because I think people will still be joining, right? And just maybe I'll share a quick brief about Upekkha and then we'll
Oh,
jump into that topic.
okay.
So, hey folks, welcome. Shekhar and I are partners at Upekkha. We help early stage B2B SaaS founders grow faster. Some folks call us the YC for India SaaS. So we've been doing this for a while now. So we have folks who have got to 20 million in ARR, 10 million in ARR, 3 million, 5 million in ARR, and quite a few folks who have crossed $1 million in ARR. And our goal is to help founders build great SaaS businesses and unlock tremendous value for themselves, their employees, and their investors. So that's about Upekkha. Our community is very strong. Many of you folks must have known us through our community, or some of you might have known us through our LinkedIn marketing as well. And in 2024, we are very focused on bringing AI B2B software companies to high scale. Right? So a lot of folks trying stuff in AI, some folks trying stuff in AI in B2B. And we've been actually working with, ironically enough, folks who were doing AI before ChatGPT made AI cool. And the nice part is, for many of them, they're actually solving real problems. They're solving it with tech that is not GPT or NVIDIA based necessarily. And now their customers are giving them a much better reception. And 2024, we want to focus on many more of those kind of folks as well, who are bringing AI to solve real problems for customers. And that is a focus for us, to help them with coaching, community, and capital. So that's about Upekkha. If any of you are investors, we have a demo day happening tonight at 10:30 p.m. It's a US time zone thing. But if you want to join that, please drop us a note and we'll help you. This is only for angel investors or seed investors. So coming back to the topic of the day, services in SaaS. Let's start on that. So Shekhar, you were asking, there's already an S for services in SaaS.
Yes.
So why the hell do you need more services in SaaS? Is that the gist of your question, Shekhar?
Also, how it has evolved over time, right? Because
Sure.
initially we used to find that everything used to be like an monolithic or as uh, isolated product, right? Whether it was a email or whether it was a CRM or whether it was something else. But these days, I see that there is a lot of API based and integration based, data flowing between multiple SaaS applications. So I think it'll be good to just understand that evolution first for the folks.
Yeah. I think it's a great question, and I think you've been seeing it for longer than most of us here, right? As well. I think a very high level way that I think about it is that for any person to get their job done, they get stuff from somebody, they process it, give it to somebody, get it back, process it, do something else, give it to somebody else, do something else, and then maybe hand it off all together. That's like a jobs to be done kind of a model. And so whatever you're doing, whether that's a piece of metal that's being made into a knife, or a piece of data that's a customer data, prospect data, which is becoming a customer through a sales process that you're running. In all these cases, a lot of different things are happening, you know, that you do, that you get other people to do, that you orchestrate others doing, and so on. And historically, I think getting people to work together was done through forms. If you go back 40, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, it's done through forms. If I want you to do something, you will give me a form, I'll fill that form and give it to you and then do it. Or in the factory kind of a context, I'll give you a job card or I'll give you a part which has to be changed and so on. Right? And so the first version of what we're talking about of integration between parts was actually through, very unstructured form data kind of a thing, which was going between people. And then when SAP and Oracle and all of these folks got into the business, they changed those forms into integrations, which push data somewhere, pull data somewhere between systems, but largely as flat files in many cases. Right? You're literally shipping files around, and in some cases, if the place is offline, you might be shipping that file around on a USB or not a USB at the time, but literally on a disk between machines in a factory. Right? And I think now, in the last 10 years, I think, or 20 years, maybe since 2004 or 5, more of that stuff has been happening through APIs, where that same data being interchanged between systems has moved away from these, paper forms to, flat files to, hey, calling on an API. And that led to a huge change in how different softwares work together. And I think the next generation of that, from a SaaS perspective, was also that, no company is starting up as a greenfield thing from scratch. You always have some old data. You want to migrate into the system. You have some old processes. You want some change management for that. You have people who don't know how to use the new thing. So you want training for that. Whole bunch of things around that to actually get the job done. Right? And so that became, to me, packaged as professional services that a lot of SaaS companies offered, saying, look, we will come to you, we'll figure out what state your data is in, we'll tell you how to move that data into our system, and then do a whole bunch of things to actually get your job done. Right? But today, I think the question that you are asking is very, very interesting, because in the past, all of these things had to be done by people. I was talking to a founder who has essentially a HR tech product, and they need to integrate with a very large number of existing pieces in the customer ecosystem. And this implementation of just integrating with existing products that are there used to take months, because each of these end pieces will have a different version, different configuration, different things it's doing, and every customer is very different. So this used to take a lot of time, right? So one of the things that has happened is that professional services component, which used to take months, for which they would build professional services, but they would not be building the product, they are now able to do with LLMs and integrate those things much faster. So now the API to API integration can be done using a person plus LLM, rather than a person having to figure that out from scratch by themselves. Right?
No, makes sense, Prasanna. And I think we should probably dive into that a little bit, more, so that people understand how these, because I visualize this as, having a lot of microservices where data is funneled between multiple applications into the LLM, and the business operations become so efficient, right?
Yep.
And it's data driven, predictability, decision making is through not just data driven, because data analytics was there before, but it also becomes very predictable based of thing, and also it is high levels of automation also happens, right, at the enterprise. uh, I think so we should dive into it. We can actually keep this aside for some time, just to before we look into something else, and then we'll come into AI and what the effects of
Sure.
AI are. But Prasanna, I think if you look at Salesforce and Slack, and how they started off with a product, and then they started having marketplaces, and then a lot of cloud services, whether it's a sales cloud, services cloud, etc. They started bringing a lot of sophisticated services along with the product and built a empire, right? So how do you want to comment on how people should look at when they are building the product, what can they learn from uh, companies like this? Even in Slack, I think all these bots that they introduced to be able to do things, actually integration with a lot of other SaaS solutions. So all that, I think if you can just comment on that, that'll be great, Prasanna.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, like the way that many of the products went from being self-serve and online to needing a lot of system integration work, professional services work, be able to function, is also a journey of selling to SMBs and selling as a point product which solves just one thing, where whatever is before it and whatever is after it doesn't matter to me, right? Versus in the enterprise where you are in the middle of a large set of other things that are going on, right? I think that is the story of also a Salesforce having to add a lot of things to its platform and stack to be able to function appropriately and effectively in an enterprise context, right? And I think one of the bets that Microsoft took with Teams when it saw Slack, Microsoft got really scared of Slack.
Interesting.
And the reason they got scared of Slack is that they felt that, hey, Slack might become the new OS for a business, where a business doesn't care about a Windows or a Linux or a Mac as much as, hey, my entire team is on Slack. That's the place where my team meets. It's not in the office. It's not anymore in their laptop. It's actually on Slack. Right? And that's where you see a huge number of companies which have built Slack integrations or MS Teams integrations, so that you are in Slack, you're communicating with people, you're with other people, you're doing stuff. But now your work comes to you where you are with other people. Right? But then the other side of that complexity is that I might have 10 tools, you might have a different 10 tools, somebody else has a different 10 tools. So how are those getting into Slack, and how are we each consuming that? What is the security around that? What is the usability around that? A lot of those things become challenges, right? So I think that services piece of somebody trying to say, okay, for you, what is needed? Should that be in a website? Should that be in Slack? Should that be somewhere else? How do you do that? All of those things are stuff that didn't exist 10 years ago, because those surface areas didn't exist as strongly 5 years ago or 10 years ago.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. So it's interesting, right? So folks like, say, if you look at Zendesk, they're not only, I mean, so we talked about like Salesforce and Slack and product innovation to do a lot more automation and service offerings through the product itself. But then some folks are actually doubling down on the professional services.
Yes.
And my understanding is that some of these guys, this professional services is not like only an added revenue stream, but actually is the guidance for the customer to use their product effectively, and thereby increasing customer satisfaction, stickiness, and all those things, right? So how do you see this services becoming, and here I'm talking of core services even being offered through people, of course, with some level of efficiency and automation done, right? But even there, do you see that this is going to continue to stay? And if you take the example of a Zendesk, their consulting services, what should other founders look at when they are offering services and products?
Yeah, so I think there are so many parts to this question, so many interesting parts to this question.
Okay.
I'll start off with the most simplest one, which is, if any startup is starting off and you don't have enough domain expertise in an area, and you want to get deeper into a few customers and understand them like very, very deeply, doing services for those customers in the areas where you are building the product will help you a tremendous amount. And these could be very simple services. It could be something like offering integration services. So for that company, so let's say you're doing customer success product, right? So let's say you start offering few customer success implementation pieces to your prospects. So you start working with them on just implementing a few things in customer success for them. And this could be like you giving them checklists, or you giving them training, or you implementing some tools for them, or you doing a build, operate, transfer kind of a model of that whole function for them. Whatever it is, you start doing stuff around that customer success area, then you'll start realizing the pain points of your customers far better than if you were trying to just do a Q&A with them, right? That is one level, right? And I see a lot of founders do that. It's considered taboo in the VC world in many cases to do services for your customers. But what I would say is that starting this way and keeping it clean, not that I'm going to become a services business, but I'm doing this to learn, and time boxing that, and not doing it with too many people, but doing it with a few good people who can give you good inputs, who have good practices themselves and something like that, can make a massive difference in the understanding you develop of that customer space. So this is the first great reason for doing professional services for your customers. Okay? The second reason is, if you're building a product which is very land and expand, where you're landing with a small piece and then you want the usage to expand over time to become much more. And one of our startups, the way they've done it, they were charging, they charge, the land is something like 6,000, 10,000, 15,000 a year in US dollars, and they can expand up to $300,000, $500,000 a year, right? In these kind of scenarios, if you don't have clarity on what that path looks like, what steps need to happen for that expansion to happen, then you will not be able to do it very well, right? So this is another great reason why you should embed yourself in a sticky way with customers. And the beautiful part is, most customers, if you embed yourself in a sticky way like this, they will actually pay you for it, right? You just have to bill it under the right heading. So bill it under the right heading, get paid for this, drive that training, onboarding, integration, migration, whatever is required around your product, reporting, analytics, all that stuff you will learn on that to build that. And then when you're able to take that one company from, say, $10,000 to $100,000, then you can look at, how do I replicate that through my product? So this is another great reason why you should not shun professional services or working deeply with a few customers to go really end to end on value delivery. That professional services should be used, right? Shekhar, do you have any examples of these two kind of things or adjacent things?
No, see, one thing is, before just one thought, right? It is a great point that you mentioned about this land and expand and how people should use this, right? And whether we call it from a professional services point of view or it's built into customer success, that's okay. But one thing I realized, Prasanna, is that because there are we are supporting a lot of Indian startup founders. It's a much easier way for them to break into enterprises by landing first, even if it is at a small ACV, and then start, expanding by providing all, not just services alone, but uh, even if it is more different features, different offerings, they can actually do the expand strategy. So I think that's a great point that you mentioned about thinking about the land and expand and being able to execute that successfully. One thing, maybe Prasanna, that would be uh, relevant or important to point out is, when the other trend is about this vertical SaaS, right? So what happens is that Viva is a good example, and I want you to talk about Viva because you always talk about Viva, and I've also been reading about them. They not only they were able to build such a large multi-billion-dollar revenue business with taking very less capital. In fact, in Series B, I think Series C, I think they took only 4 million. Of course, in IPO they raised a lot of money, but the interesting thing was that they started offering a lot of services through whether it's through product, or I'm not differentiating it from a professional services, but I'm saying services through their products. But they were very, very, very knowledgeable about that domain, and they were
Absolutely.
providing insane amount of value to the customer, right? So is that trend happening where vertical SaaS with a lot of domain expertise on that vertical is actually helping founders build large businesses?
100%, right? I think the Viva founder, when they took their $7 million round, right? That was the last round of capital they raised before the IPO, and they spent only 4 million of that. Right? They had the 3 million left, but they wanted to make sure that they had, they became cash flow positive very soon, right? And so when I look at their IPO filing, right, for the years before, just the year of their IPO, they had $73 million uh, in subscription revenue. They had $56 million in professional services revenue, right? And in 2 years before that, when they were still like growing and figuring stuff out, they had $19 million in subscription revenue and $9 million in professional services revenue, right? So half. So it's a 60-30 kind of a split, right? Actually 9.5 million. So it's actually 60-30, 60-40, right? Closer to 60-40. Now that is very interesting, right? Because like Viva is one of the top SaaS companies growing of all time, and they did it very capital efficiently, and they're like at a, I don't know, couple $1 billion in revenue now, and the valuation is probably 20 or $30 billion even today in today's circumstances. And they had 30-40% of services revenue back in 2011, when it was all supposed to be product revenue and don't do services revenue and stuff like that, right? But in the enterprise context, that is what helped them to get to IPO very fast, and that is what helped them to deliver exceptional returns for their investors, because they did not need to take on a lot more capital, and they learned a huge amount from those professional services, and those professional services become a moat by itself. Because we have to understand that from a vertical context, they were implementing CRM for pharma. And so how many people know pharma from a tech standpoint? Very small. How many people know CRM at all in 2011? Very small. How many people know pharma CRM implementations? Nearly zero. And in that nearly zero, who's the best? It's Viva. So when a customer is saying, hey, I'm a large enterprise, I need somebody to help me implement a CRM for my pharma company, which is doing billions of dollars of revenue, I'm going to pick whoever is the best at helping me do that end to end, not just somebody who says they have the best product for it.
Makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. The depth at which these guys have gone really is amazing, right? The kind of things that they do for that particular vertical. So maybe the learning is that founders, more and more customer conversations, they should continue even after they release the product, understand that vertical so deep, and provide services and product solutions around that, right? To make that, so so it's like you can monopolize if you have that vertical knowledge, right? So I think completely agree with you, and I think that's something people, founders, need to think about when they do look at horizontal SaaS versus vertical SaaS. And if you have any thoughts on where should they focus on, uh, when they look at whether vertical, horizontal, because this is something like I hear a lot of founders asking what should the playbook be. And if you have any thoughts on that, we should quickly just touch upon that also.
Sure. So what I typically recommend is founders should look at their starting point, where they have a deeper understanding, which networks are open to them, where they can go and ask customers, hey, can you pay me $100,000 for something, right? And then if they're able to then double down on that, that usually works better. The horizontal versus vertical, a lot of horizontal markets in SaaS today are very competitive. So do you have a marketing edge to win in those spaces? Vertical is less marketing and much more sales and relationship and depth and so on. So if you're a very detail oriented, depth oriented person, then maybe go into like vertical. If you're really good at marketing, if you're really good at being able to sell at a high volume and build a great product led kind of an engine, then a more horizontal approach might make more sense.
Got it.
Should we take Nitin's question, Shekhar? He's asking a question about pricing services into SaaS.
Just one last point we should
Sure.
talk about, and then we'll take Nitin's and others' questions also, Prasanna. So one thing is that I think this is the big question. I'm sure Nitin also has this question, because the big question is now people are talking about AI, right? And folks are looking at solutions with AI, and AI first solutions versus invisible AI, etc. Rajan, when we talk to Rajan, talks about a lot of things. He understands probably AI the best among all of us, and he talks about saying that how customers will look at as outcome based rather than product based, right? My understanding also, Prasanna, is I've been reading about a lot of these things and talking to a number of people in the US, enterprise people who are working in enterprises. uh, I think too that the enterprise architecture will be different. But I have no answers to this. Would like to hear your perspective. But what my questions in my mind is, even will how will customers approach? Okay, when you have AI-based solutions, customers, are they going to even buy as SaaS products, or are they going to buy as a service, right? Are we going to go back
Yep.
to this thing where IT services were being offered by India? Now are they going to be offering AI as an outcome based service? This is a topic I think we should talk about. I don't have
Yeah.
answers, but whatever you know, Prasanna, and I'm sure Rajan can also add in later sometime, right?
Sure. So I think this one, like we've been thinking a lot, working with folks to see how to make it happen as well, right, on the ground. I think Intercom set the tone early on by saying, hey, we no longer, we want to have a model where we're charging per closed customer request or closed customer conversation, right? So Intercom tried to move from being a product company to actually being an IT enabled service, right? Of course, there are no people behind it, but there's AI, but it's actually priced per call or a conversation, just like if you outsource it to a call center, that's how you might pay, right? Now, having said that, when we look at I'll give a very contrasting example, which is a managed marketplace example from one of our startups. So they manage a marketplace of experts, and in the beginning they were only looking at, hey, I'll build a product which experts will use to deliver some services, right? But then they realized that for this to become valuable, they needed that marketplace to showcase these experts to customers. Then in that process, they realized that these experts don't want to do a lot of the shitty work, because there is a nice, like, cool work there. But before the cool work and after the cool work, there's a lot of shitty grunt work, right? So they realized that, hey, maybe I should do that shitty grunt work before and after the cool work, so that I can match make more of my experts with their customers. And then ChatGPT happened. And when ChatGPT happened and LLMs happened, what they were able to do was this shitty grunt work before the cool work and the shitty grunt work after the grunt work, they're able to do and create a managed model where that offering is there for customers. So the customer is now seeing that, wow, a lot of stuff that gets done. The part that only an expert can do is being done by the expert. They don't care whether you're doing it with AI or not, the grunt work. But because it's being done with AI, it's being done much more faster. It's being done much more systematically. The expert is happier, because if they were on another platform or doing this by themselves, they would have to do that shitty grunt work.
Got it. Yeah.
But this way, the whole offering itself as a managed marketplace is changing to become more end to end. But I don't need to be an agency to deliver this. I need an army of AI plus these experts, because the AI cannot do what these experts are doing, which is bringing in some very, very specific, domain specific, very, very like deep kind of a cool work that they're doing, right? So these are like kind of different places where people are playing to say, I will offer you something which only AI will do, and I'll charge you only for what it's doing. And on the other side, saying, yeah, people will be there, AI will be there. Why are you worried about how that mix is there? We will take care of it. It'll get done. The job gets done for you. You pay for it, right? So I think like that whole spectrum of things will change and it's going to change a lot more than any of us can even imagine.
Yeah, I think so too. So that's why I was saying we don't have the answers. Sometimes I wonder whether will even the budget decisions, right, change in terms of where do I put, which category do I put this into,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And will
Yeah.
even how exactly startup products get evaluated, how startup products get bought, the decision making, does that change? So many questions in my mind.
It's a great question, Shekhar. I was speaking to one of our startups, and they're trying to sell a product in a space where, let's say, larger companies actually outsource that part of it. Right? They're trying to sell an AI product which actually does that. Right? So imagine that they are like the intercom trying to say, hey, you know what? Use my product. Just solve the customer service queries. You don't need to hire people for it. That's what they're trying to do. But they're facing a lot of resistance. And the resistance they're facing is people are not sure, will it work? I don't know. I don't want to take that risk with you. Right? And part of this resistance is exactly what you said, which is budget. Because these folks actually have an OPEX budget for people, professional services outsourcing. That is a line item.
Yeah,
I can outsource this to a team of 3 people who will do this for me, and I have a budget for it. I don't have a budget for buying a product which will do this. Right? So what I told them to pitch and position, because the customers see the demo and they're like, wow, this is amazing. And then like 30 seconds later, 1 minute later, they're saying, I can't buy this, which doesn't make sense. So I said, for at least few customers, why don't you offer it as a service, saying we'll do it for you?
got it.
Because some of these customers express the fear that they don't know how to manage this AI. What if the AI gets something wrong? What if it says something that's not correct?
Got
What
it.
if it is difficult to figure out? Right? So this kind of fear is there in customers' minds. So last week, literally on Friday or Thursday, I was telling them, look, you got to go and don't try to, if your customer budget allows for them to outsource it to a team of 3 people, you tell them that, look, I will take that line item, you outsource it to me, I will run it for you. Then in the next renewal cycle, you can figure out whether you want to run it yourself or you want to continue giving it to me.
Got it.
Right? So this budget conversation is so critical, and a lot of founders, young founders, don't understand that in enterprises, some purchases live and die because of the definition of that budget line item, right?
Absolutely, and also very interesting that you brought up. See, there is also an ethical consideration. Also, I don't know how that plays in legal and ethical considerations, because today, if in the news, right, Gemini is not being bounded properly, guardrails not being there, hallucination effect being too much. Who takes responsibility for that if somebody is
Absolutely.
using that in the front
Exactly.
end? And
100%.
yeah, so a lot of those considerations are there. But it'll be, I think this is a great conversation, Prasanna. I think it'll be great to watch what is happening, and I'm sure as our founders start working with enterprises, I'm sure that we will learn a lot more from our founders also, right, and
Absolutely.
from the customers that they're working with. So that'll be interesting to wait and watch. We can take questions. In general, I think I see that this whole space, okay, with AI, is only going to make the solutions be more and more powerful and attractive, and so I think it's all good. It's just that founders will need to find the way to maneuver this and
100%.
build the product, services, and sell to enterprises.
Right. We'll just take these 2 questions here. They're both aligned. How do you price services into your SaaS offering? And should pricing for services in SaaS be based on resources or volume of work? Also, if the service is aligned with revenue conversion for a client, then should the service be priced as revenue share? Right. So to answer what I used to tell people, and what I would tell people is, you probably need to have 5 or 6 line items in your product, which are services kind of line items. And this is for mid-market or enterprise when your ticket size is large and you're like putting together a nice proposal. So you can charge people for onboarding. You can charge people for data migration. You can charge people for integrations. You can charge people for training. You can charge people for change management. So these are like just 5 line items. There are many more, but at least 5 line items you can put in as separate, distinct line items with separate statement of work for each of them and charge for them. And of course, you can charge for customer success. You can charge for consulting. You can charge for quarterly business reviews. All of these also you can add as line items and charge for them, right? And so these you would charge in a way where you at least have 50% margins. So you may not have 80% margins on this, but you should at least have 50 to 60% good margins on these things, right? Do not price cheaply. And the interesting thing you will find is many of your customers will not even negotiate on these line items. They may negotiate only 5-10%, versus on your software product, especially if you're selling in India, many people think that software should still be free. But those same people who think software should be free for these line items, they will barely negotiate with you. That's one
Nice.
part of it.
Yeah.
Second is that in the pricing for services, be based on resources or volume of work. Of course, it should be based on how much it is costing you as well, because here you're not looking to make an outsized kind of profit, but you want to make that 50% kind of a gross margin on these items. Right? And if the service is aligned with revenue share for a client, then should it be priced as a revenue share? There, I would say be very, very careful, right? Because revenue attribution is not always clear. It's very tricky. It's very hard to pull off. The only case where this is not true is where if the revenue flows through your platform in a vertical context or a billing context or a Shopify kind of a context or a transaction kind of a context and so on and so forth. If the transaction is going through you, then you're going to be able to have a revenue share, transaction cost, which is a percentage of the revenue, right? But in all other cases, if the revenue is not flowing through you, if you have anything that's a revenue share, it will be incredibly hard to sell. It'll be even more incredibly hard to get paid out for that, because attribution, how much revenue, where is the revenue, all of that stuff becomes very, very tricky, right? So you want to price for value. You may price per transaction, but not price as a revenue share.
Beautiful. Hey, Prasanna,
Any
I think
thoughts,
you should
Shekhar? Yeah.
No, I think you elaborated it. I mean, you told. I mean, I have nothing else to add, right? You've already explained that. So, Prasanna, I think you should just take Nitin's question also, and then we'll close it. Because
Yeah, I'm done with Nitin's question. That's the 6 things that I had listed.
That is what he had. Okay, I didn't see the question. Okay,
All
okay,
right.
guys. I think this was great. This was a good conversation. We will be back next week.
We'll be back in. See you. Bye.